only 2-3 minutes. I'm coming to my conclusion. That taking clue from Dr. Ambedkar's emphasis on not calling Hinduism a Hindu civilization. What Ambedkar says? Ambedkar says that this Hinduism, or better word to use to that is infamy, he says. The better word to use is infamy, not civilization. But you have Professor Kanche Ilaiah Shepherd coming up with the entire emphasis, endorsement on the Harappa civilization, and saying that this Harappa civilization symbolizes the spade, whereas you have the counter-revolution coming from the Brahminic scriptures, who has used the book to completely demolish the spade. So there is a wonderful chapter in this book, the spade versus book. Now, why this civilization matter is very important? Because again you are having one controversy, that do not call Harappa civilization as Harappa civilization, you call it as a Vedic Saraswati civilization. From last 1 year, in fact, if I am not wrong, that is also a school textbook, new insert, new addition, that this I forgot his name, Daunton or some scholar, he had put in the NCERT class 6 textbook. Now, in this entire the regime of untruth, or what they call it as, in this entire aura of regime of truth, how should we deal with this project of destabilizing the Hindutva? Because the intellectual, moral, social reformation doesn't come only through writings, but it only enlarges or expands when you act on it. That is what even Mahatma Phule had was doing it. Now this brings to me the major important point of the usage of the categories in the current 21st century, or whatever period that you are calling it. Probably Dr. Ravikant Kisana might disagree with both of us, both Professor Kanche and myself, but as I said, the pure Brahmin Iyengar categories are not going there. Categories are, in fact, they are taking pride in, sort of using it, assertion. Categories are asserted now, categories are stabilized now, and categories are normalized now in the so-called urban, Indian landscape. Now, can we understand this category sociologically and anthropologically is something even I also feel, but when institutions are not, or let me put it in a very different framework, or when institutions are having itself a dominant narrative, how can we, especially again, the marginalized communities, how do we study ethnography, or how do we study sociology or anthropology? Now the Brahmins might do an ethnographic study on the Dalit kitchens. Now can the Dalit and the Shudra do an ethnographic study on the Brahmin kitchen? Show me one book. Show me one book where an ethnographic study is done on the Brahmin, Vaisya and the Kshatriya kitchen. Now this question I might ask to the so-called mainstream academia. If this question is not asked, for me the dominant narratives, the mainstream narratives of the so-called anthropology, the little tradition, great tradition, that does not work. I think this is something, this Buffalo intellectual can offer us. His writings probably is, it might look as very strange, but they are very, essential. Yes, critique should be there. Obviously, without critique, again, the intellectual churning that does not take place. Even I have, my own issues with Professor Kanche's writings, but still, one cannot completely disregard the scholarship that, Professor Kanche Ilaiah had brought. Now, lastly, this books mostly brings in, I'm happy, literally I'm happy that, Geeta ma'am had, taken this, work. Because who would talk on Shudra historiography in this time? Or who would, it's not, yes, when a book comes, it is not that the publication always endorses the book, the narratives, but still, the question remains, right? What if, this book were coming from Oxford, or to put it another way, why this book is not coming from Oxford, Cambridge, or Harvard? why the alternative publication houses are publishing, because the politics of publishing also we have seen, right? As many of you are aware of the hatred in the belly, Roundtable India's entire issue, right? So this historiography, what Professor Kancha talks about, an alternative Shudra historiography. Now, when I was thinking of how to take forward this Shudra historiography, I can see I can see many young scholars, students, some of our own students from Pakpet who are here, and across, like from IFLU and TIS Hyderabad, students are here. There is a structure of this so-called post-colonial Brahminical state that is there in front of us. Now, this Shudra historiography can offer some insights in studying the structure of this post-colonial Brahminical state. That is number one, submission. Very implicitly, this book or Professor Kancha's writings would offer. Number one. Number two, how are its various organs are operating in itself. Let's say how police, a entire criminal justice system is operating. Because again, the agenda of religion or agenda of culture, it cannot go separately from the economy. So you have, Dr. Ambedkar making a very brilliant point in his Mukti Kon Pate, What Path to Salvation essay, that conversion is not only a cultural agenda, it is also a, material emancipatory agenda, right? So we need to understand these various organs, how its operation. Number three, the nature of the alignment of the classes, different groups. And number four, the ideology of the elite itself. And now this elite, it's not again a homogeneous category, like how the Sudras or OBC is not a homogeneous category, right? And Kancha is aware of that. Professor Kancha is aware that the category of OBC or Sudra is not an entire single entity. That is the reason the post-Hindu India work, or turning the pot, tilling the land, dignity of labor work has come, which many of the scholars don't, agree with. But if he were, putting the entire things under one carpet of the Shudra or OBCs, that work of the different productive castes would not have come. So as a students of sociology and, social sciences, I think, we need to pay a very serious attention when we are reading, this. And number four, the contradictions and coalitions. Number five, the role of the personalities. Number six, the ideological character of the historiography itself. And I have largely benefited from Professor Kancha's scholarship. That is the reason I'm probably, able to make some sense in understanding the ideology of the mainstream historiography. Now, you might say that, Professor Kancha's writings are expired. You might even argue that Professor Kancha's writing does not hold much significance to the, because, liberal arts is coming, the entire interdisciplinary, subject, the nature of the discipline itself is changing, right? Then how can, his writings, which does not have any references, which does not have any footnotes, which does not have proper sociological validity, how his writings would help? No, then I think you are at a mistake, right? His writings, obviously, it requires a larger postmortem, but it also requires a larger celebration like this, right? And, lastly, to quote one thing, that the categories are important, as what, Professor Kancha says, is that for liberation, you need identity. For liberation, you need identity. And having this, the notions of identity and liberation are two different things. I'm quoting from, 3 lines from the book. To move towards liberation, the construction of an identity is inevitable. But the construction of identity itself does not mean that the goal of liberation is reached. I think this resolves, the dilemma of using the word Shudra, where even Mahatma Phule has used unapologetically, saying that there should be a dichotomous social structure, Sudra Ati Sudra versus Sethji Bhatji. He was unapologetical about it, and the Satyasodak Samaj went ahead. And you are reading Mahatma Phule now, and we are, still celebrating the, legacy of Mahatma Phule's writing. And in the similar way, we would also take forward, or we will also celebrate, we will also critique the writings of Professor Kanche Ilaiah Shepherd. Thanks for giving me opportunity. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, Professor. So Kanche Ilaiah Manikanta, and it's a pleasure to know Ravikant. I've not met him before. Uh, I think Manikanta's introduction to the book and Professor Kanche Ilaiah's ideology has kind of summed the book for us. What I'll do is largely pick up 2 or 3 major arguments around which the Shudra rebellion is built, and then offer my own views on it. I mean, I never thought of rebellion as an unsuccessful defense of authority, right? So this kind of interested me, and I was wondering if Professor Ilaiah had this thought in mind, or he also, or if he wanted to subvert this idea of rebellion itself. But that said, in the most frequently used sense of the term, rebellion is an act of defense against established authority. And in this sense, the book argues for rebellion against the caste authority that has also not just within the closed private class sphere, but also consolidated power and authority in many other spheres, as he has noted, and notably in the spiritual, knowledge-based, political, cultural, and economic sphere. So how caste has consolidated its authority in all these spheres, right? Overtaking what we would like to call our nation or our people is something that Kanche Ilaiah is doing. And this rebellion for Kanche Ilaiah is a very desired rebellion, a rebellion that is yet to be, a rebellion that has been in the waiting for long. Right? It is a cherished dream for most of us here, and perhaps all of us here, is what I'd like to think. Unlike the usually unsuccessful defiance from the dictionary that the rebellion connotes, this rebellion is an aspiration for the future, a hope about which we can never be prophetic enough. More than anything else, it's a plan, and like Manikanta said, it is an agenda. What kind of agenda do we have? What kind of counter narrative do we have? And narrative is not enough. What kind of a systematic laying out of plan is required is what Shudra rebellion is all about. And I would actually say it's like a manifesto for the rebellion. Right? It charts out the plan for the future, for a much more egalitarian society than what we are right now. In fact, this morning I was teaching a essay by Madhav Prasad, and there were 2 things that connected what I was teaching and what I was reading from Professor Ilaiah. One is about passive revolution, and passive revolution is how the making of the modern Indian state is characterized as, right? Via passive revolution. That is a revolution through nationalist freedom struggle, which helped change the Indian political form from that of a monarchical, feudal, colonial to a modern nation state. What Ilaiah's manifesto is doing, it is a manifesto towards changing the nature of this nation state itself, right? So from what one imagined as a modern nation state, its characteristics are totally antithetical to what is imagined as an egalitarian democratic nation state. So here is where Ilaiah is kind of intervening and telling us that this nation state form is kind of empty, or it is kind of very, very undesirable. It is very, very unequal, which all of us know. And what is the alternative? Here is the alternative to change the form and content of this nation state, right? And that exactly because from the colonial power, from the monarchical power, the way power has changed hands in this modern nation state is a continuation of one elite to the other, from the colonial elite to the national elite. So the central question for the book is around the change in the structure of our society, change in the manner in which power functions along caste lines. And this book conceptualizes this change as a very peaceful kind of a change and not violent. And this rebellion, despite being peaceful, is not passive. This is what something that I want to emphasize. It is a peaceful revolution, right? Passive revolution is also said to be peaceful, not very violent. But in a very, very different sense, this kind of a rebellion is also peaceful, but it is not violent. And this rebellion is not passive, but direct in its questioning of power and direct in its intention to change the same. And so how does Ilaiah conceptualize this change? I draw largely from the last chapter. This is his larger plan as to how this change can happen. Although I am drawing this from the conclusion, much of the chapters also contain this idea, right? So how can Shudras take over and change the system? Number one, take pride in being who we are. So far, larger narrative is you are apologetic for basic things. Even if you eat meat, if you eat pork, it's a kind of apology. There is no pride in what we are, in the activities we do, in not just in eating and other cultural kind of a sphere, but also pride in our knowledge based on production systems, right? Our knowledge is based on production system. This is exactly what Ilaiah emphasizes throughout the book. We need to take pride in the way we have built a civilization through productive means, not through passive means, but through productive means. So take pride in what and who we are. I mean, I also had a small question here because I was thinking, he also writes in the book, today many women are proud to be a woman, Dalits are proud to be Dalits and so on, but Shudras are rarely proud to as Shudras, right? And I was wondering what it is to be exactly proud to be a Shudra woman, right? In fact, sometimes I think this could be almost a trap. To be proud as a woman, to be a Shudra woman, among many other things, could also mean to be proud of their kitchens, to be proud of being mother. And where is this? How can we resolve this kind of being a proud Shudra and being a proud Shudra woman? Second thing, one is take pride in our identity. Second is think about the philosophy that is inherent in our system of knowledge production, and also production based activities that lead to knowledge, right? There are two different things. One is knowledge production and other is production of knowledge based on our production based activities. So the example he gives many example. One of course is the spade which Manikanta refers to. The other is also toddy tapping, for example. What kind of practice is involved, what kind of knowledge is involved, and what kind of knowledge system can be built out of these very small, so-called small activities. Third one, research the philosophy and the knowledge that you derive from these productive activities, right? So research the philosophy, not enough. Textualize it, write about it, think about it, write about it, especially in our own languages, and also most importantly, write about it in English. Fourth one, transmit and circulate this knowledge, what we derive, what you write. Fifth one, build a vernacular philosophy, right, based on this knowledge. So how do we build this vernacular philosophy? Ilaiah gives a very interesting example of Narayan Guru, who didn't know English, who knew only Malayalam. He also knew Sanskrit, right? But Narayan Guru from Malabar, northern part of Kerala, who built a philosophy based on his interactions with commoners, largely Ilavas and Tiyas, right? So now a OBC caste group, then termed untouchables. How does Narayan Guru come up with this vernacular kind of a philosophy? So we need to have much more philosophies based on Shudra lives. The other agenda as to how to go about Shudra rebellion is to build a museum that celebrates agrarian artifacts of things which are concrete and abstract, based again on the production based lives. So these are the larger ideas that are emerging from the book as to how the rebellion should carry its path forward. Now, what I like about the whole argument, the whole book, is this, that there is a focus on production-based Shudra philosophy, right? It is not an armchair philosophy, it's a production-based Shudra philosophy, which is also termed as Shudra spirituality. So this knowledge system, this philosophy which I derived from our practices is also known as Shudra spirituality. Most scholars also in popular imagination, spiritual is something that is separated from the material, right? Spiritual is something that is separated from the practices, day-to-day life. Spiritual is something transcendental and definitely separated from the production related activities and intellect. So spiritual remains in a fold even today, despite many Shudra critics and despite many Dalit movements. Spirituality remains in a very transcendental, inaccessible kind of plane. But what is very interesting and very relevant here is that we have a spiritual derived from the Shudra philosophy that can never be separated from the material. Right? This spirituality and materiality will have to go hand in hand. Right? So that is something that is very, very crucial for the whole book. In fact, Ilaiah points to the caste processes involved in the separation of this high caste spirituality and material. So high caste spirituality has always consciously separated material from the spiritual, and here we have it other way around. For long, Indians are also, the representation of India outside of India and also within India as well. India is represented as spiritual, whereas West is represented as very materialistic kind of a society. Now there can be, there are many things which are far from truth, but this is one of the farthest from truth. So while this kind of spirituality not only hides the Brahminical nature of spirituality and also its inaccessibility, it also very successfully marks the material nature of Brahminical practices. To say that Brahminical spirituality is not connected to materiality is one of the biggest falsehoods, is what I would argue and what Ilaiah would argue, right? So Brahminical spirituality also is connected to their materiality and the material gains that they accrue from projecting spirituality in such a manner, right? What are the material gains? The gains of power that such Brahminical spirituality begets. And not to mention, this kind of separation of spirituality and connecting materiality to the West also reduces West and also Shudra Dalit caste to materiality. West is not just material. West also has its powerful and not so powerful kind of spiritualities that we conveniently, don't explore at all. I don't know how much time I have, but I have one more page to go. Yeah. So what I see from the above and also from the book is this. I also see a move that is quite different from the earlier books that I'm quite familiar with. Why I'm not a Hindu and turning the pot and tilling the land. And if I remember right, these two books, earlier books, argued for a politics that was based on the local, that was based on indigenous practices. And there are places in the Shudra rebellion that urges the Shudra to take control over religion, right? And to take control over spirituality. And this is something I'm not very sure with. I have to think through it, but maybe Professor Ilaiah can talk about it more and right now in the discussion. Because all these arguments are for changes which happens within the format of the nation state. So we need to take control over religion. We need to take control over knowledge production. We need to take control over the political economy as well. But all these things are envisioned, all these changes are envisioned as happening within the framework of the nation state. And taking control by one group, which is a very amorphous, like Manikanta said, disparate, and of course Ilaiah is very clear about it, that within the Shudras there is a hierarchy and so on and so forth, but still constitute 52% of the population. How does such a amorphous and a heterogeneous group take over the spiritual ideology of a nation within the framework of a nation, right? How will this account for the spiritualities of other religions, especially minoritized religions, right? And also, especially indigenous religions that are outside of the Shudra fold, outside of the caste fold, and what we now know as indigenous tribal religions. How do we build a relationship with these kind of religions when there is a Shudra rebellion? I am not sure about this because I am beginning to suspect the form of nation itself, right? And how long will this idea of nation continue to stay as it stays? And especially so because most nations are built on some abstract idea of a distinct spirituality. Every nation is built on some idea of distinct culture, distinct spirituality, and so how will this Shudra's spirituality be different from that of these existing? Almost every nation is unequal and oppressive in nature, right? Can actually spirituality function within an egalitarian frame is the larger question I have. Similarly, actually, the idea of civilization, I've been reading this book for quite some time that my children are like, when will you finish this book? It's called Dawn of Everything by Graeber and Wengrow, David Graeber and David Wengrow, where they actually reverse the idea of civilization. I mean, they basically destroy the idea of civilization and talk about how whenever we invoke this idea of civilization, it's inevitably a big civilization. Harappan civilization is one of the known biggest civilization. Egyptian civilization is the known biggest civilization, or Mesopotamia or Maya or whichever. Why is this focus on big civilizations? Even if we claim Harappan civilization as a Shudra civilization, is it because it is big, huge, grand? What about smaller people scattered everywhere across the Indian subcontinent? Was their lives not civilized, practices not civilized, right? So this idea of bigger civilization is something that is unsettling as well. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the role of language, the role of English in this whole idea of Shudra rebellion. But maybe I will talk about it during the discussion. And yes, there is much to talk about it, and English is also a very, what do you say? It's a very interesting site. It's a very amenable site for a lot of disagreements and lot of interesting arguments. I will do that later on. For now, thank you very much, and thank you so for this book.
Yeah. Thank you for everybody for coming. I think it was a good move to put me as the last speaker because if you give me free time, I'll not shut up. So this is a good way of doing this. Thank you, Professor Kanche, for inviting me to review your book and to be part of this event. I think you've told the story before. Like many of us, our consciousness comes from his books. So Why I'm Not a Hindu was a very pivotal book for my journey also. So the book that Manikanta was showing, the last book, Shudra, A Vision, if I remember the title correctly, I wrote a review which has since been described as nasty. That was not my intention, but it was a harsh critique. And one of in my 10 years of academic experience, this is a very standout moment for me because Sir reached out and actually kind of congratulated me for the review. And when this new book came out, he reached out, he said, you have to do it. And he told me very clearly, be critical. In my 10 years of dealing with Brahminical academia, I've never found this. So in that sense, I really admire that, and I wish more academia was like that. So thank you for thinking of me, Southside Books, for organizing this event, everybody who came out on a weekday. And I apologize, I don't speak Telugu, I'm a stupid North Indian, so you'll have to deal with English. Very quickly, I will just try to kind of wrap up some of these ideas that I have about the book. I think Manikanta and Professor Soumya have done a very good job of laying out some of the big ideas. When a book comes, I think there are many ways we can think about it. One is what the content is saying, and one is what it represents. Since the content has been very well kind of summed up, I would like to talk a little bit about what it represents. So a little bit of a celebration and as requested, a little kind of my contention with it also, both in this together. The first thing that, of course, the thing that strikes, and this is not a casual comment, the language of the book is very easy to read. The tone is very direct, like most of Professor Kanche's writing. This is very important because many of us, now I might speak very smooth English, I wasn't like this. So it's very important for the audience of the book, for a lot of us, the language of it, the tonality of it, it's very direct, and the scope of it is very important. So in that sense, the book already succeeds right at the beginning. Unlike both of Professor Soumya and Manikanta, I did not check the dictionary for the word rebellion. I was just excited by it. I've decided to suitably look military in my appearance also today because I was very excited. I loved the title immediately, Shudra Rebellion. You know, because why not? About damn time. That was my immediate reaction, and that's what I really want to start by talking about what it represents. I think the book is a very audacious attempt to kind of give a material historical claim to history. I think one of the things that I think Baba Sahib has also described as like the broken people of history. Like my own family village in Punjab, what is now Punjab, we trace our history back only about 5 generations. We don't know where we came before that and before that and before that. Most of my Brahmin colleagues know 800 years ago they left Kashmir. You know, so we don't have a claim on history. How do you fight somebody when their entire idea of civilizational superiority is, oh, we come from the Rig Veda? Can you read the Rig Veda? That's not important, but Rig Veda was there. So in that same sense, I do understand your point about why is Harappa civilization so important? Is it because it is grand? Like maybe Sir can respond to it, but for me as a reader, it was like, yeah, it gives me a claim to Harappa. It gives me a claim to 5,000 years of history. It gives me a claim to the idea that this is mine, and we've been broken. So I think in that claim itself, it's a very powerful claim. I think also the idea of agriculturism as a philosophy, like as a material production as a philosophy, I think it's very, very overlooked in Indian academia because, of course, it would. Because Indian academia is very Brahminical, they don't produce things at all, as Sir has said many times over. I like saying this very often also, that Brahminism has never been a knowledge producing culture, it's a knowledge performing culture, it's a knowledge validating culture. They come and they say this is good scholarship and this is bad scholarship. So in that sense, like it is very important, I guess, this idea to create something of a philosophy which is coming from a material kind of a thing. As somebody who looks at a lot of Chinese TikTok and Chinese reels, it's something where, and even for the brief time TikTok was allowed in India, you saw this surge of creativity of marginalized people, of Bahujans, of Shudras, of Dalits coming and, just creating these very interesting kind of working prototype videos, and farmer videos were going viral, all kinds of things. So there is a very latent organic appeal for it, which has not yet been intellectualized. So I think in that sense, this is a very, very interesting move. Also, this emphasis of the word Shudra, I think is very, very important. If you are categorized as OBC, it's very difficult to locate yourself within the caste movement. Because Bahujan is a political concept, right? And there is the need for that marker. I get very irritated. Like I see mostly Savarnas use, the word DBA. Like first time I'm publicly talking about it. I know many of our own people also use it, but it's clearly telling you D stands for something we understand, A stands for something we understand, but the B is like this occupying space. Bahujan. Bahujan, otherwise, actually, it's an oxymoron because Bahujan would include Dalit and Adivasi. So you are saying you need a third term, but we don't have it. And you see in the political experiment also in the Lok Sabha, the Samajwadi Party comes out and starts saying PDA, Pichla Dalit Adivasi. So this experimentation, this grasping for a word is there, you know, whether it is Pichla or Bahujan and everything. And I think Sir's attempt to kind of, Professor Kancha's attempt to kind of locate that word in the word Shudra, I think is a very powerful word. I think the book also is very good at theorizing about the Brahmin colonizing of the Shudra mind and agency. I think in the scope of it, it begins and talks about Manu and Kautilya, and it goes all the way to Ram Madhav and Shashi Tharoor, and I quite enjoyed like the commentary on Rahul Gandhi also. So in that sense, the scale of it and the scope of it range is quite good, and it's very modern because some of these critiques are just buried on Twitter. So you have to be on Twitter, and Twitter doesn't have a citable value. So in like, you know, to raise the point that Manikanta was also saying, like the book is not referenced. So how do you deal with it? No, the book is the reference, because the otherwise this argument is in Twitter somewhere. And based on that, like I would also like very quickly want to move on to, since we are theorizing about how Brahmin colonizing of Shudra agency has been in place, it's also important, like, you know, another topic where Professor Kancha writes very well and has always done so is on the role of the English language, English medium language. I myself, my own life, I have traced this very clearly. For me, it's a distinction. I'm the only one in my family who speaks good English. And it was born, it came not because I was particularly talented, it was from a desire to really kind of get into circles which otherwise I would not get. So, and I grew up in the state of Bengal, and Bengal had this strange language politics where Bangla language is very kind of, you know, sort of pushed. But like the Bangla language, people who are studying in Bangla medium can't get jobs. Jobs are going to the people who are studying in convent schools. Even today, the best schools in Calcutta are the St. Xavier's and La Martiniere and all. So in that sense, so for me, I understood that politics much before I found the language or I found, you know, Professor Kancha's words. So for me, it's always very powerful. A lot of my own work speaks to this performance of knowledge and language at the intersection of it. Not to romanticize the power of English, but there is a power of English. And very quickly from this point, I will also start pivoting into my little bit of contentions with the project, with this book. As much as I like the title and the book and the scope of it, and the fact that it does also address some of my own past critiques. He has written very nuanced, in nuanced ways, like he will also mention about Shudra atrocities on scheduled caste. He has mentioned of it many times. He has also talked about the intellectual leadership of the SC cohort in the thing and the Shudra failure on that. So he has kind of touched on that. But one of my big contentions is, and the clue is in the chapter he's talking about English as an education, where he kind of points out that, you know, the feudal landlords, the agrarian feudal landlords, did not want to study English because English is suspicious for them, because when you introduce English into the household, then my kids might not want to stay in the village and they can't look over the estate. So in that sense, that's a very powerful insight actually. It also kind of points out at the political imagination of the Shudra, which has never been very national. It has always been very regional and very local and very estate driven. So always content to be the Chote Raja, you know, when the Mughal is also there, you're the Raja of your region, and then there is the overlord. In many which ways, post-colonial India has been a neat replication of those power relations, which brings me to my main contentious issue as a Shudra intellectual myself and as many of us is, throughout the book, many times, Professor Kanche has used language like, Shudras have fallen for the trap, could not understand, forced by Brahmins to be like this. A lot of this discourse infantilizes Shudra agency. So we are basically framed as historically stupid children. कि हमको समझा ही नहीं, we didn't understand only, this happened. No, no, I think some of it also has to come from the idea that we are willing historical participants in some of these processes which have landed us there. I think a little bit of reflection on that also, along with rightly putting the critique on the Brahmin colonizing agency, I think that is something which is, and I would understand why editorially someone might not want to focus on that, but it is a very important element of this body of knowledge or ideological project that we are trying to kind of create. Like caste is also a history of violence. It is a history of violence which Shudras have also not just been recipients of, but also participated in, right? In this thing, and in that acknowledgement, there has to be kind of a review of it, which is why, like, Professor Kanche has kind of like really framed the Punjab protest very as pivotal. As somebody from Punjab, like, I have a very different understanding of that protest, and I've never seen it as very pivotal in that sense. It is an agrarian project, but it is not like at least the way I see it, right? Because it kind of, to frame it like that, invisibilizes what the landed gentry in Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP, the violence of it within their own communities, within women of their own communities, within the scheduled castes, within minorities. Like, there is a lot of violence in that project. I think there is also a thing to be understood that in graded violence, when you are the perpetrator of the violence, the system is also rewarding you. We are not, as Shudras, not just, lost children of history who were led astray, and some of it obviously is there, that there is a lot of, like, you've been led astray. But I think some of it also has to do, because Sir's methodology is so deeply oriented into political economy, I think politically economy wise, there is something to be looked at these sort of debates, like also the reluctance, and the hint is there, the reluctance of going into English education, the reluctance of going into kind of, so many Shudra parties have political power at the state level now for decades. They are important players. Look at the educational or intellectual apparatus they have created. It's very deliberately vacant, because that's not an area of priority. That is not the result of Brahmins misleading them. It is also a result of, this is not my priority, my power comes from elsewhere. It is also real politic in some form of the other. And I think if we have to create, and I'll wrap up with this, I think it was Kanche Ram Sahib who said that, like, he had a very simple heuristic, very simple formula, that the community which suffers the most has the most desire for social change. By that yardstick, if you look at the scheduled castes, at the hierarchy of they have the most radical impetus to kind of reject the system totally. So when you look at the caste entire superstructure that has been set up, you have the Brahminical idea of what this Dvij idea of what nationhood or society can be, and then you have the counter imagination which is coming from Baba Sahib and many others. And of course he is also doing that same project by going to Buddha. Buddha gives the scheduled caste or the Buddhist claim to 2,500 years of history, because then it's like, no, we are the longest running resistance movement. It's been going on for 2,500 years, and it adds many dimensions to it. So you go to Maharashtra, all these Buddha vihars in Vidarbha. I lived there for a year. I was lucky enough to be in that space. You see Samrat Ashok also there. You see obviously Buddha also there, because all of that iconography is then claimed. So I understand the scope of that project, but if along with the idea of the Brahminism and the Buddhist or the Ambedkarite idea, if you're trying to create a sort of a third claim on imagination, on social imagination, and we are putting it under Shudra and like wrapping it with the idea of material production rooted in some form of agriculturism, then we also have to then talk about the graded inequality of violence, because you do benefit from labor that you're not paying for. that you're appropriating. So it is very much rooted into that production also. So anyways, that's one contentious, takes nothing away from the fact that it is a tremendous book. I think there's a quote, there's a section where he mentions the story when he met Partha Chatterjee, the great, I won't say great, but the Brahmin scholar Partha Chatterjee, and he immediately asked him, "You're working on Buddha. Do you know Sanskrit?" And it's fascinating that, like, I think Manikanta also mentioned Spivak, like at at their stage of the career in 2024, Professor Kancha is still putting out books which is provocating, which is kind of stirring, which is kind of adding new dimensions and has scope, which I think is a triumph that Brahmin scholars at their level are not doing. And in that sense, and I will wrap, this was the last point, because Manikanta said something like, imagine if this book had been published by Oxford. I say reject Oxford. Dump it in a bin. I don't care about it. I actually truly have started figuring out that this is not our praxis at all. So rebellion, the Shudra rebellion, is not necessarily a plea to include us in that thing. It begins with rejection. We'll do our own thing. You are not invited in that. By that yardstick, I'll wrap up. I think I've taken enough time. Yeah, all right. Thank you, everybody. Jai Bhim. I'll wrap up.
Outset, let me thank my friend Geeta Ramaswamy and our new imprint of Hyderabad Book Trust called Southside Books, and also three of these friends. I've been engaging with them, and Manikant, who has been part of our activity, Soumya, whom I know for quite some time as part of our ideological companion, and Ravikant came in touch with us, a bitter critic of our work, and we loved him for that. So for all friend of mine, Kaki Madhavrao, 84, coming at this age, and Madhu Yaski, who is a political activist. Now, before I talk something about the book, about the politics of publication. My first book, Why I'm Not a Hindu, manuscript, I sent to one of the major publications located in Hyderabad itself. And within a month, the owner of the book publishing house, wrote a counter book to that by rejecting it and sent it to me. And unfortunately, I lost that manuscript, otherwise I would have published. And this book also I submitted to them, and they said, we'll send to 3 referees and then get back to you. After 3 months, they said, we are rejecting it because 3 referees rejected it. Now the rejection seems to have started with the title itself. Then of course the contents. But I was very serious that some publication, small publication like Samya did Why I'm Not a Hindu. And Geeta just started. I asked Geeta, would you do it? She said, yeah, absolutely, I will do it. And they have done a wonderful job as a team of editors. I must tell this girl who is introducing me, her end name is Gupta, Deepanchal Gupta. Then she was part of the editorial team. Some of the critical remarks that she made in the editorial part of it, I really liked. I thought, a Gupta with my mind, correcting me positively. So that was a strange, and then I called her and I said, I want to see you. So now Manikant said, at the age of 72, I wrote this book. I may write some more, may be possible, may not be possible. But those of you who have this book in hand, just look at the contents. I'll start with that. I will not take much time, Deepanchal. The introduction is a starting point with the farmer's 1.5 years, 700 lives lost battle against a massive central government, and it defeated them. So the rebellion is not a lost rebellion but a successful rebellion. Then I thought, this is not just farmers thing, the base of it is the Shudra. Though Dalits are part of it and that. Therefore it starts with that. The Shudras in Hindutva living without soul. So this is a very critical thing. How Shudras in Hindutva are living without soul. Their body is with them, but the soul is elsewhere. Then second one, the spade and the book. Can anybody imagine that spade and book could be comparable? That too, a new civilizational discourse. How spade becomes an agency of civilization. Third, Shudra and the dynamics of controlled cognition in history. How their cognition, their very consciousness, very stimulation of brain is controlled by the Brahmanic forces in history. Then when I was reading back into history, the Shudra kings, I was shocked. How Shudra kings were not at all rulers. It were the Brahmin ministers who were rulers. All through, right from the Gupta dynasties, but then I got a very solid evidence from Sahu Maharaj. Very solid evidence. How he wrote a letter to the British governor, former governor, what Brahmins were doing Shudras in his kingdom. Then a historical divide, Dalits and their separation from Shudras. This will be a very controversial chapter, and the critics of me would be my own Dalit friends. And even Ambedkar would also attack me on this from his, unfortunately he was burnt, but if he were to be buried, he would have resurrected and come back and had a debate with me that untouchables were Buddhists but not part of Shudras. He never accepted that kind of a formulation. But I made so here. Then the idea of God, Shudras, Brahmins and Jews. Any major publication with this chapter would reject this book. Because Jews and Brahmins and Shudras are compared. It's uncomparable thing. So then Shudra agriculturism and Indian civilization. Nobody in the academic discourses in history was heard a concept called agriculturism. It is a mundane agricultural activity, but never was a ism. So then why did I do this? Then Shudras at risk in Hindu Rashtra. This chapter is for contemporary process, what RSS, BJP are going to do for Shudras with their own agenda and how they encircle their consciousness. Hindi for Shudras, next chapter. English for Dvijas, Sanskrits for Devatas. This is also rejectable chapter. Nobody, even Penguin, would have thought that this is nonsense. No. Actually, Sanskrit is in the all Brahmin houses, and the gods are in their houses. There is no English in Brahmin houses at all. But I am saying Hindi for Shudras, English for Brahmins. To understand that, please read Gita's book. What their conservative Brahmin parents did to her as a child. Then the last chapter is Shudra English nationalism. Is it possible to assume that in English nationalism, maybe there could be a case against me, there are already 5, for saying that I am asking for English nationalism. This is unacceptable. Already maybe dozens of foreign Christians must have been sitting in my house to create English nationalism here. So this is the framework. But then, where did I begin this very idea? The first major departure, is it raining? Yeah. Oh, I can't see that. Now Vedas, Ramayana, Mahabharata are being imposed on schools, colleges as a compulsory study. And there is an Indian discourse that philosophy came from Rigveda starting with. Now I started thinking very seriously that did philosophy start in India, began in India with Rigveda or books? Then my own reconstruction was no. The source of philosophy is agrarian production and animal economy. It is wrong to think that there is no philosophy in food producer's mind. Every food producer in our village is a philosopher. And book is not the original source of philosophy. And such books which are written with an assumption that philosophy comes from either man's brain or from an abstractive idea is absolutely mythicizing the whole human civilization and life itself. Therefore, philosophy started in agriculture. And who started this philosophical discourse and knowledge? The issue for all political parties. Where did the development begin in India? Who started the whole process of development? So my first reflection was, development in India began much stronger than China, Egypt, Israel, Greece, in India with the Harappan civilization. Who built it? It is the Shudras. The idea of Shudra is not post-Vedic, but the idea of Shudra was pre-Vedic. They themselves must have called themselves Shudras, who were animal economists, agrarian labor, working masses, and therefore claim this Shudrahood right from the prehistoric availability of our existence. It is not from Rigvedic source. Now what seemed to have happened was, the Rigvedic Aryan Brahmins made them slaves and declared that you are Shudras, you are slaves, that's all. But the Shudra existed there earlier. And it existed now. But it is completely oblivion. It is so pervasive in our life, Shudra word, but it is completely oblivion in our textual discourse. Brahman exists very strong. All Ramayana, Mahabharata, Vedas are full of only Brahmins and Kshatriyas. There are no Shudras as people. There is no production there. Therefore, I thought of constructing history from a Shudra productive agrarian philosophical base through this small book. And I know it is a very difficult project, but a project that could be achieved by future scholars. That is the agenda of the book, and therefore I request the young scholars who have come from different universities and so on, carefully read each line with a critical eye and with a critical framework to come to an assessment of this nation's future vis-a-vis Hindutva, vis-a-vis Brahmanism, and vis-a-vis the Western world and China and the Islamic world on the Western side. My assumption is, if the Shudra becomes the central force of Indian economy, Dalits will become part of it, and caste annihilation becomes possible. Without Shudras, caste annihilation will not become possible. And there will be this problem of atrocities, this problem of hierarchization, this problem of man-woman, this thing. It is there in Brahmin houses, worst man-woman problems. Sati to burning wife along with husband, it was never there in Shudras. So let us not worry about, scholarly work should not worry about the contradictions in family and that, because you have to understand the nation and the world. Therefore, this book, when I thought of writing, perhaps as a last possibly, because this has been thought. I'll tell you one anecdote. When we used the title, The Shudra Vision for a New Path, for that book, Penguin CEO called me and said, how can you use this word Shudra for title? Then what should I use? For these people use OBC. I only said, if I use OBC, Narendra Modi will be part of the book. Because he is an OBC. And North Indian Banias will be part of the book. That is not what my project is. Because in North India, all Banias have taken OBC certificates. So if I say Shudra, in fact, one day one Congress spokesperson called me. I said, sir, I want to ask a question in media, press conference, that whether Prime Minister can say that he is a Shudra. That's a very critical issue. If he says he is a Shudra, his Baniya friends will go away. But if he says he is an OBC, they will be there. Then the Congress High Command did not accept that kind of proposition in the thing, because they had their own problem. Now, you must seriously think about this whole concept of Shudra. If you look at Andhra Pradesh, from Reddys, Kammas, Velamas, Kap to Mangali, Chakali, barbers to all shepherds to tillers, pot makers, fishing, all of them are Shudras. Historically Shudras, even now Shudras, but they don't have that designation to them. If they all own Shudra identity in Delhi, this whole problem of 90 people, out of 90 people, only 3 OBCs being there does not exist. Only 3 will be from the Brahmin Baniya community. The rest will be Shudras. The Shudra identity is not owned. And particularly Kerala Nayars. When Shashi Tharoor wrote this Why I Am Not a Why I Am a Hindu, he wrote against me. Actually, he thought he was writing against RSS. So I wrote a strong review in Indian Express and Caravan. He read both of them. In one of the literary festivals we met. He said, Kanchaji, why are you after me? I said, but why are you after Shudras? And he said, what is this Shudra? I said, are you a Shudra or not? Are you a Nayar or not? He said, I am a Nayar. But are you a Shudra or not? No, Nayars are Kshatriyas, he said. I said, then I did not say, because he was MP. Poor man was also facing some cases like me. I did not want to say that what an historical ignorance of his own existence. He was a Shudra. Nayars are tillers. Nayars are labor even now. Nayars were also rulers, but they were never Brahmins. Then I asked him one day, Mr. Shashi Tharoor, can you become a priest in Sri Krishna temple in Guruvayur? What is this question? Funny. He thought that this funny. He thought that, this fellow did not study in St. Stephen's, therefore he is asking such question. So I said, look, you are completely grappled by the Brahmanic history and writing your book from other books. This is called lift irrigation. Writing books from other books is nothing but lift irrigation. I don't do lift irrigation, I do original irrigation. I write from my people's life. This book, original thesis, comes from a village, observing village production, tilling the land, making the pot, catching the fish, eating the fish after burning. Who taught burning? Who taught a dhobi how to wash clothes to clean when there was no soap? This soap, they discovered soil soaps. Then who taught them? Mere soil soap does not kill the germs. Then they discovered boiling the clothes at the dhobi ghat. What a great discovery. A Brahmin is a typical, I lived with a lot of Brahmin intellectuals. Each one will say, what an intellectual our Brahmin, this man is. So what did he discover? He discovered that all leaves are green. Abba, what a discovery. Our fellow has discovered leaves are green. Abba. Then if Kanche Ilaiah says, no, there will be some leaves which are not green. No, nonsense. This is Ilaiahs. This is Elias, Pulayas. But the fellows have no idea of leaves at all, because you never produced any leaf from earth. You only eaten them. And unfortunately did not eat the other food. Therefore the problem. Therefore what I request is English. I am dreaming and dreaming every day like Martin Luther King. What is my dream? The day when all Shudra, Dalit, Adivasi children from one end to another end speak English, America will come begging for science into this country. We have enormous science in this country, but we have not written about it. Even in Telugu we have not written. So therefore, my request is, see, as Dechama said, there are problems, but to undo the Hindutva project, all those problems could be set aside. The only way you move forward is unify the Shudra in the mental frame with a strong philosophical root that you are the real builder of this nation, not the Brahmin. Brahmin has not produced even a ton grain, right from 15th BC to till today, not a single ton grain. Therefore, how do you call yourself as builder of civilization? So therefore, my request to you is that this rain is disturbing, but still we are not disturbed. Think about it, read carefully, and reading habit is not Indian. All of those of you who travel in aeroplanes, you just see the moment Indians sit in aeroplane, in long journey aeroplane, the moment they give food, we eat and sleep in the aeroplanes. And see Europeans, Americans, the moment they eat, they open books. 70% people start reading books. Now, this is the difference. Our children are not taught to read. So please read, write and fight. And if you are Shudra, OBC, Dalit, Adivasi, look back to your roots of your occupation. How many generations? A lot of you are now alienated from that root. So look back to your occupation. Therefore, lastly, this chapter on God. Gita said that somebody asked, does Ilaiah believe in God? I believe in God. But what is my God? My God is equality. My God is equality written on the wall. But then, my God is also tiller, producer, worker. My God is not a killer. Now that is the reason why I compared Jews who were a small people spread over the world even after Genesis was written. Moses did not change the country from within. He was a slave. But the God created first two human beings who started doing labor in Bible. And when Adam and Eve rebel against God's dictum, and he did not kill them. If it were in India, God would have killed them. What God said, woman, you are so more intelligent than man, you discovered that all fruits can be eaten. But what is your problem in future? He said, in procreating children, you will experience labor, pain. And what did he say to man? Man, you have started eating all the fruits that I also not allowed you to eat. From now onwards, work and produce with the sweat of the ground. Imagine. And their children, Cain and Abel, one was a shepherd who could have been my great-grandfather in Israel also. What is this land? And one was an agriculturist. Where is such God here? Show me one God, such producing God, working God. God works for 6 days in the Genesis. And seventh day, sixth day, end of the day, he was tired. In India, gods don't tire 24/7. They are not tired at all. Weapons are there in hands. And seventh day, rest. What does that God tell? You have to rest to recreate yourself, to re-work on the land. That is the work. And the Shudra gods are that. You go to Birappa's history, Mallappa's history, this thing. So lastly, the other day, when we installed a big statue of Gadar in Nalamala forest on the way to Srisailam, backside Tirupati temple, a god who eats only cow ghee laddu. And I declared there, O Nalamala people, there is a new god in your forest now, that is Gadar. You worship him, he will not give you only cow ghee, cow laddu, but he will give you freedom and knowledge of English also. Worship him. And that is what my God is. Ambedkar is my God. Phule was my God. Savitri is my goddess. Now, with that idea, if you don't demolish what their gods are, then Shudras will not have history and survival. Thank you. So you can ask questions in spite of the rain. Thank you.
Anybody has any questions, please raise your hands. Also, just a request, please keep your questions short so that we can accommodate as many questions as we can.
Good evening, sir. Here, Arun. I'm a scientist. I'm also an educator who teaches artificial intelligence and deep learning. In my day-to-day life, I interact with a lot of students generally. So, want to understand from your research and your knowledge that is there a correlation between caste and education, like choosing an educational field, because we have in broadly in India we have engineering, mathematics, medicine, and then arts, right? So if you see people coming from specific caste choose one. I mean, I just wanted to understand if there is a correlation. If yes, why? I think my question primarily is coming from a lot of students these days, attempting government exams actually, because a lot of students who reach out to me are come to me after exhausting either their number of attempts or they, and then like I have wasted these many years doing this, etc., etc., and then tell me if there is something I can do in the software industry. So and I see that a significant amount of those people are people who are coming from the lower stratum, right? What are your observations on this thing, sir?
No, actually, in certain states now, the whole education is forcing these boys and girls to constantly work around these competitive examinations, which do not immediately give jobs to all of them. You know the battle on the streets in Telangana? Several lakhs took in the prelims of Group 1, and the government said that of the total post, 1:50 only we will allow to take the mains, and that came to 31,000 and all. Now 1:50 is a huge thing in a competitive thing. So therefore what is happening is education like agrarian production has to be a regular day-to-day school, college working activity, which is not now. Secondly, if your education, school education is rooted to the understanding of tools and technology. You said you are an AI engineer. You know, AI now is not very new. Villagers had their own AI. Yeah, they have several mechanisms which do other things, human things. So, any knowledge that is coming up in the modern science world has a root in the earlier human life. But this is not taught to the children. For example, engineering. In Post in India, there is a chapter called Unknown Engineers, in which I included pot makers, ironsmiths, goldsmiths, and carpenters. Are they engineers or not? Is there a lesson about them in the school? Secondly, there is a chapter called Social Doctors. This is about barbers. And when my mother told me that when I was born, the barber woman acted as midwife. And one of the critical problems in childbirth in villages for ages is cutting the navel connection between mother and with what kind of knife you should cut, because that is the one which can create septic and kill both mother and child. You know, the barber woman did not bring her barber knife, which would not result in septic. She asked people in the house, is there a sickle which is used just yesterday for cutting the crop? The sickle that is used to cut the crop yesterday would not have rust. You understand? The sickle that you cut the crop throughout the day will be completely rust free, will be sterilized in its own way. And therefore I did not die. If she were to cut that umbilical cord between me and my mother with a rusted sickle, Brahmins and Banyas would not have had a problem in this country with me at all. I would have gone long time back there and there. So they are saying that why is this fellow born writing all this stuff? This is how great common sense science they apply. Did you write a small lesson about it, barber woman? And then who washed my mother's clothes for those 21 days? There was Chakali Lingam. What did we do as shepherds, kurmas? After my birth, Chakali Lingama is not allowed to come inside the house. She would beg the food from outside the house. I was shocked when my mother said, if she was my this thing, she washed my clothes, your clothes, why are you keeping her outside? Why are you keeping her the last left out, giving us left out foods? Now this is the problem. You have no brains of childhood equal. You are not allowed to think. That is the problem. If our children are taught that way, I'll tell you, Indian education system will be far superior than American education system. And you have to close all these coaching centers, complete, and close all this Narayana Sri Chaitanya nonsense. Absolute rubbish education. Let the children study in proper schools up to 12, then up to graduation, compete near state with that graduation itself. That's how it has to be. Thank you.
So are you a Telugu or why I'm asking? Have you watched Shekhar Kamula's movies? Yeah. So that itself would give an answer to a question, because for example, the entire Happy Days movie, or how Shekhar Kamula's movies sort of symbolize the engineering education. It was predominantly, mostly who was initially taking or doing Bachelor of Technology BTech was mostly Reddys and Kammas, especially from the Andhra Pradesh. Then slowly the shift turned towards chartered accountant, and the management courses again mostly whoever having the business they were doing it. Now there were references, Zhang Bao, a scholar who had tried to link this education dowry system, and also mostly focusing on the NRIs, that too Reddys and Kammas. Now the other thing is, when for example today there's this Swero's Day, H.R. Sankaran sir's birthday also. Now there are lot of rural marginalized community like students who studied in the social welfare residential colleges. Now they are now in the companies who are working with the so-called big corporate artificial intelligence companies, and the slogan also that we are not just job seekers, we are also job givers. Now there is this transition also that is there, where the students from the scheduled caste and the other lower castes are also coming into that untouched sectors. So yes, in India, this caste and education, that link was clearly there. And also there was caste, the gender and discipline also. For example, in South India, if it is a girl, MBBS, if it is a boy, BTech. I was also, but I have overcome that, and I took, the roadside Romeo Bachelor of Arts, education. But luckily, I was in HCU, JNU. That's how, my education went. Because this transition of, subjects discipline is something that we have to understand probably now. Like being as a faculty, lecturer in a private university, Dr. Ravikant, might tell more on that. Even the liberal arts, for example, but in private universities per semester they are paying lakhs and lakhs. Now, who are studying now? Studying Bachelor of Arts earlier was seen as a roadside Romeo course. Are what would you do? You would just roam on the roads, like how you would roam on the Amirpet streets, Maitrivanam. Right? That's what our parents used to say. But now there is a lot of demand, and that too most of the private universities are having liberal arts course now. I think this is the paradox that one needs to understand, which again Professor Kancha a bit discusses in his last two chapters.
It's in private university, but in University of Hyderabad. Today, if you look at the students coming for languages, let's say Telugu and Hindi, it's largely Bahujan. Urdu also, yes, but there are some Kashmiris coming and people from other places coming. But languages and arts largely, even within the general category, because we follow the reservation system, even from within the general category merit list, quote unquote merit list, students from other categories get into these language courses. Whereas in other courses, because of the reservation system, there are all kinds of categories. But yeah, the case of language kind of is, it stands out as an example.
Take an analogy of two parts. One, from the standpoint of inaccessibility of education, which has been there for a long years and has been breaking slowly after India was independent and the constitution was formed. Lately, we have been seeing a lot of ground-rooted education movements from the remotest villages in India. To name some, it would be Eklavya movement, Nalanda movement, the Hudvi movement with the Muslim Sufis from Kerala and going to Bihar, Kolkata, Bengal, the remotest of the villages, giving education as an emancipatory part, which even Baba Sahib himself has pointed out. And then the second analogy is that of English being a predominantly primary access to reach out to the global school, which you have also been quite vocal about. Now, let me see it from my own experience in premier institutes like this and DU. We see multi-faceted student cohort from rural villages, within the rural, the Brahmins, or within the cities, the Dalits or the Bahujans. So it's a microcosm of the Indian society itself. What I'm trying to say is English as a form of education, and these Eklavya sort of movements have made students from the first generation background to reach still the bestest of the colleges around the world, right? I mean, okay, let me get to the question part of it. There has been a disconnect, which I also feel, being a Malayalam speaker myself, my parents can't understand English, and if I take up this idea of English being, yes, I agree to that, but how do the trickle down of the previous generation, where I would be able to reach, inshallah, Oxford one day, but my parents won't be even, getting benefit of it from a consumer point of view, and the gap, the disconnect is still being relevant there. And how can we think in the future for trickling down of the access through the generation? Yeah, I hope I made sense.
Check. And here's their fantastic movements. But if you ever sat with Anup Bhai or if you sat with Raju, they'll tell you immediately that they are trying to get 100 students in, 200 students in. How many students is Narayana and Chaitanya sending? As of today, the Indian coaching industry budget is almost comparable to the Indian higher education budget. By 2028, the coaching industry market value exceeds the Indian higher education budget as per trends. Marginalized students that like one center here or there are sending is like to call it like a drop in the bucket is also over exaggerating the influence, right? Some students have gone to, and I know many of these students who have gone to Ashoka also. You know what will happen? They'll take in Ashoka University, blessed Ashoka University, they'll take 1-2 students. And every time somebody comes there, no, they'll say, here is our scholar, marginalized person, we've got it. 700 students are also there, but they'll bring out these 5. You go to Bangalore, IIHS is there. They wrote to us while I was there, like, can you send some student? One student they will ask. And I was presenting a conference there. One girl from Nalanda was there. And one student, that time I used to teach in Flame University. Flame student was also there. Both of my students in the same class. I asked the girl, I said, they gave you admission here. Do you understand what's going on? She's like, sir, there's completely on her own. But basically what this is their corporate social responsibility campaign. They're taking 1 or 2 students in so that we can't go on Twitter and say, hey, Sonipat College, why are you not taking us? That's what that is. So let's not mistake. Now, within that Ashoka, within that there'll be one small section of maybe SC, ST, OBC student, father, mother, somebody is like IAS officer. What will the first thing they try to do? They'll try to put you in the best school. That's exactly what Professor Kanche's point is. You go in the best school, what is the ideological apparatus there? By the time that person comes to first year college, they are into K-pop and anime and Emily in Paris and all of that is there. Now when you come from Kerala, you're saying, you're English speaking, I can totally not connect with you. Now this is a crisis. Of course there is there. But that person is also trying very hard to fit in. Right? This lack of communication between that person's cultural capital and yours or even mine. I was that person for a long time. I went to Jadavpur University and these Brahmin guys came to me and said, do you like Jim Morrison? I did not know it was a shirt brand or a singer. They said, do you like Queen? I thought meant actually that time Queen Diana and all were there. I did not know it meant the band. Right? But I had to learn that. Now when I meet younger scholars from community, I have to make that effort, be like, no, I'm on this side of the table. That's a language we have to learn. Part of the reason that vocabulary doesn't exist is there's so few of us. I hope I'm answering. And the last part of your question is parents. This is the other thing you have to learn. For someone like myself, I speak from my behalf, I've spoken about it publicly also. In 10, 12 years, in acquiring this language and sophistication and what tie to put and all that, I have jumped in 10 years, maybe 3 generations that my Brahmin Kayastha friends have jumped. When you jump that far that quickly, you lose a vocabulary with your family. Now my parents, if you ask them, they'll say, he does something. Actually, that's what they've been saying for 20 years. The vocabulary got split very early on. And I've tried most of my 20s and early 30s, I was like, let me try to, I'm the educated person. No. That's the anger, like that this is gone actually. You can't actually have it both ways. You can't learn that entire cultural new language and get into those spaces and also say, I want a foothold back from where I came. Right? But it is the painful process. This is the only other way it happens. Like, I don't know if I've responded to your pointers, but like, I would challenge this idea that like so many of these people are now coming into higher education and speaking a certain form of English sophistication that actually first generation learners now can't speak to them. I think that's something that that's a very Brahminical propaganda. Let's kind of stay away from that.
or a road cleaning woman or man uses. In India, the only language from which all Indians use not less than 200 words in life is English. From glass, ticket, milk, yeah, you just count. And in my village I counted even the oldest woman today does not say uppu in Telugu, salt. So what is there in your mind is, Brahmanism has put in your mind like a pressure cooker thing that English is colonial, don't take it. But for them it is their mother tongue. So I'll give you one example. In my village, I started an English medium school in 2002. And that school today has 250 children. The government school in which I studied has about 50 children. Now, who are these parents sending there? All of them are agrarian labor, small farmers, SC, ST, OBCs. They want their children to go to English medium. Why? They don't know English. Then one day I went to the school, asked the parental meeting, then told the teachers and parents that make your sons and daughters that do same work at home. Your son should sweep house, wash clothes, wash dishes. Daughter also should do the same. And they were very upset. Study English medium, but not to sweep houses, not to wash clothes. I said, what happens if your son sweeps the house? No, he will lose his mogatanam, his manhood. I said, that much. So the only way is he has to go to America to get that salary. But there, if he does not do all these things, wife will not stay with him. You know what our common sense said? Is that true? Yeah, I said, no wife will work all the time at home and then only woman will clean the house, wash dishes, everybody has to do. Then she said, in which case, I will see that he goes to America, he gets married, and then he does this work here. How? I asked. She said, I'll close all the doors and make him do these jobs. See, this is the common sense issue. So there is a problem. English is the easiest language in the world. You people have a mental block. It is called scotoma in a technical psychological language. Once you have scotoma, you don't get it. You hate it. Therefore, English is already in every man, woman's vocabulary. There is no other language which... do you think that Malayalam vocabulary is 200 words in every house? Or Telugu words in Northeast? Or in Chhattisgarh? No. Hindi words? No. English is there. So you have to engage with that with an open mind. I keep telling, if me, Kanche Ilaiah, could write this English, anybody in the world can write English. Anybody. Because I was a damn shepherd, I was a tiller, I was a stupid child. My mother used to call me mad son. Now I am really mad writing these books like this. So you don't worry about that. You can teach. I had a series of 12 videos called Teaching English to Sheep. 12 lessons, how to teach English to sheep. The rich upper caste teach English to dogs. They talk to dogs only in English. Dog, come here, come here, come here, go there, eat, eat. Then I said, no, I will not teach dogs, I will teach sheep. which is a productive animal, you know. So this is all rubbish. Remove that from your mind.
Going to write today's civilization. So what is that? Would you be able to throw some insights on that? What is that you think? And are there any new castes which are born in the 19th century or else in the 20th century? If so, and how you make the connection to these particular castes?
So that is, in the entire Indian civilization, from domesticating buffalo, sheep, goat to present, we are living in the best part of human life now. And whether this will continue in future is a doubtful thing. Because I have seen in my childhood, my village Dalits will eat in the summer only when there is a dead bull or buffalo or cow, full food. I have seen hunger, starvation, and my father with 100 sheep all the time, 50 goats, some land, would not wear shirt. When a nearby school teacher asked me, how does your father look? I said, my father looks exactly like Gandhi. What do you mean? My father has no shirt. My father clean shaves. There is a juttu back here. So Gandhi gave up all the dresses, including suit, boot, and became semi-naked. My father had no shirts. That is the problem. Today, in the villages also, that situation is not there. But from here to future, if India can locate its Shudra civilization back into your domestication of buffalo and create a culture where God also respects buffalo and its ghee, then the civilization will be much better. That is the challenge. And you don't have to beg from America. The aspiration. Every village child today aspires to go to America or Europe or Australia. Boys and girls. And when I was in college, and you all experienced, I have not seen a single woman even riding cycle in Usmania campus. Riding cycle. That was not acceptable. But today, so therefore, pessimism does not work. And civilization is definitely advancing. AI will not threaten. Harari Navova is threatening every day with one leg. I keep saying nothing doing. Our villages have many AI instruments. And in future also we can do something. I think that is the civilizational growth. Unless a situation emerges, the world sinks suddenly. Human brain has enough potential to work out survival mechanisms. And you should never distrust human brain. It is, no computer can match it, no AI instrument can match it. Human brain is the unbelievable mechanism that has come into species. So, Sanskritization bullshit. In 1990, when Mandal was happening, Jats, Patels, Marathas, Nayars, Reddys said we don't want to be in the reservation category. That is demeaning us. We are going to be Kshatriyas of this nation. Yeah, we are going to be Kshatriyas of this nation. Jats were very insistent. In fact, Chaudhary Charan Singh wanted them to be part of the Mandal reservation. But Jat leaders said no. Today they are asking for reservation within OBC. Marathas asking. Are they Sanskritizing or are they Shudraizing themselves? Or are they Dalitizing? Are they Sanskritizing? They are Dalitizing themselves. They are coming down, looking towards production routes. Therefore, Reddis, I know, I have been a critic of these non-reserved Shudra caste, but when I saw Delhi Power, can you name a single ambassador from a Reddy community in any one of the countries in the world? Our ambassador? Can you name a top bureaucrat in top 90 from Reddy? Can you name one Reddy in the 200 top monopoly capitalists in India? You know, there is only one Shudra in top 100. That is Shivanada. There is no Reddy. There is this question. Even I asked Shashi Tharoor. Shashi Tharoor, you are saying we are Kshatriyas. But how many Nayars are in the top 50 industrialists, along with Ambani, Adani, Kirloskar, Jindals, and all this, Vedanta, so on. Can you tell one Nayar in the top industry? Either in the software sector, or in the hardware production, or in the marketing business. He was searching name for name. And ultimately he came out with one name called Chandrasekhar, that MP. I said, where is he in the economy? You know that? He has only one industry, that is called Arunab Goswami Industry. That TV channel. And MPC. This is all. They are living in a myth. And all Shudra upper castes are rural, agrarian, economic strongholds. Beyond Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, they are nothing.
But they are controlling
I'll
states.
give you one example. When GVK was one of the top builders, he built Bombay Airport. When Modi and Amit Shah decided all Shudras should be removed from this business and put only Banyas and Brahmins in it, they removed him from Bombay. And now you see only GMR and Adani everywhere. So they are living in a myth. That is the problem.
Sir, even if Reddy Velma
The other example is, do you see a Reddy philosopher in two states?
No,
Do you see a Reddy philosopher?
no,
A Velama philosopher?
no.
A Kamma philosopher? Then what is that?
No, even if they accept that they are Shudras, but when they don't share resources with other Shudra communities, Dalits and Adivasis, how these communities
Unite. You mean how this community? See, it is a very simple example. The Shaivites and Vaishnavites in India killed each other if they see each other for a long time. In very Telangana, that happened. Among Brahmins, their Gotra differences are thousands. But there is one name, Brahmin, all India name. When Adi Shankara went from Kerala to Kashmir, to Bengal, to Himalayas, they owned him as Brahmin. There is no Shudra category like that. That is the problem. Therefore, if you use Shudra in academic discourses as a historical, productive, common category, these acceptances will come.
Thank you, sir.
All right. With this, we would.
Sir, I agree with the point which you mentioned that to have a better society, we need to unify all the Shudras and we need to make them realize that they are the main sources for the production working section and all. So in this generation, we see a lot of organizations and other associations, youth associations, who are coming up and as well as empowering the downtrodden sections and all. But when it comes to their unifying or something, if we ask one organization to combine with the other organizations, they will come up with the reasons saying that our way of approach is different, our aim is different, our goal is different or something. But they will never come, means few organizations may not combine and work for the cause of better society. So when intellectuals, all these organizations are mostly run by the intellectuals only. So when these organizations or intellectuals will not combine or will come forward to unite themselves, then how a normal person who strongly believes that this hierarchy is made by the God and all will come and will read, write or fight, sir?
For unified society today, it was 50 years back. You young mother knows and old people know that society was more disunited, caste was more bickering, any intercaste marriage was lynched within the village without any news anywhere. So today, should I imagine in a country like India open dating between boys and girls? I could not. And RSS BJP, how much it changed before it came to power and after it came to power. The fact that Kangana Ranaut can become their member and MP and their leader is a change. What kind of roles she played in cinemas? She was a Kshatriya woman, a girl rebelled against Kshatriya family, went to Bombay, lived with all kinds of people. Then now she is there. And in my young age, when I was a lecturer, any Valentine Day I would have seen number of attacks. Any boys and girls. Today they can't attack because they have their own Kangana Ranaut. How can they attack? Within their structure. So change will come if India goes English speaking nation. There is a very incidental line in Bible. When Jesus was said to have resurrected and came to disciples, they were speaking in different tongues, not in Jewish tongue, not in Greek tongue, not in... Then after some time they started speaking in the same tongue. Then Jesus says, a day will come, all human beings will speak one language. One language. The linguistic differences will disappear. Today, in all airports, English is mother tongue of 5 upper castes. Brahmins, Banyas, Kayasthas, Khatris, and now Kshatriyas are coming. Their mother tongue is English. See what they speak in airports to their children. Only English. So what is our mother tongue? Local languages. Why should our mother tongue be this? So our mother tongue, like Savitribai Phule said, English. Within few decades. Why not? About death of other languages. My own language was killed. Lambada language is killed already. Tribal languages are killed by Telugu. If English kills Telugu, what is the problem? When Lambada language is killed by Telugu in schools, and all other Gondu, Koya languages are killed by Telugu, if English kills Telugu, what is the problem? I have no sentiment. That shows we have to think.